Lazar. Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth.
That's a fit. That's a match.
No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I don't think we have ever disagreed on an individual player more than we do on Marcus Smart. So
you don't get it. You don't know ball.
I don't know ball. Please.
Sometimes you don't know ball.
Sometimes I don't know ball. Fine. You can take your digs, take your slights. We're going to talk football, other ball in this. It's Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Catch-22 with you for the next, we'll call it like hour and 30 or so. A lot of me in the host chair today, Alex. People that were listening to PU or listening to me now. Those emailers that email in, Matt, and say that they can't stand my voice and don't want to hear me and all that stuff. They're shit out of luck today.
Rough week for them.
They are rough times for them. You got my voice hosting the show, facilitating, leading the charge for almost 4 hours. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, right? We got some news to talk about.
Yes.
We got some news, and I'll take news, any type of news this time of year, except, good news or however you want to take it. Not off-field news. Let me put it to you that way. DeVante Parker, here to stay, here to stick around. I have a little bit of a long-winded take on this, so bear with me for a second. And fill in as you always do. So I have I thought about this a lot last night. We're degenerates, Alex. I think we both probably do this every once in a while. That like things like this like kind of keep you up at night, and you like sort of think about how you really feel about these things.
I was at trivia and I just kept talking about DeVante Parker.
It's
terrible.
terrible.
Can you just answer the question?
It's horrible. I would I'm not kidding. DeVante Parker had me up until like 1 a.m. last night thinking about
you got to bed at 1? Lucky you.
All of the different permutations and all the different possibilities and how I feel about it and stuff like that, knowing that I was going to, give this take on the air tomorrow. That should not happen, okay? First and foremost. That should not be a thing. We're just sickos. But anyways, here's my take on DeVante Parker. On a micro level, I have no issues with DeVante Parker. I have no issues with the contract. I think that his agent deserves a award for putting out there that it was 3 for 33 with $14 million guaranteed, because I think we're going to get the real numbers here shortly on that deal, and it's going to look nothing like a 3 for 33 deal. Okay, so good. Kudos to the agent. Good for you.
Yeah.
You got it to look nice and peachy and plentiful for your client and for yourself. Good job. Pat on the back for you. So mainly, I think that money is bogus. I think that this is going to be a lot more team friendly when the details of the deal come out and people are going to more understand what's going on here. I also think that for what it's worth, DeVante Parker, when out there, when involved, when targeted, was a pretty solid complementary piece for them last year. He converted more targets into explosive plays than any receiver in the league. 10 catches for 20-plus yards on 47 targets. That's the highest rate in the league. 11.5 yards per target, over 17 yards per catch. Really, really good against man coverage last year, especially single coverage on the outside. When he was out there and healthy and involved, he was somebody that could beat press one-on-one on the outside and make the defense pay for single coverage on the perimeter. That's not necessarily something that they've had consistently in the last couple years. So I actually like DeVante Parker, the player. I don't mind the contract. So then you say, well, Evan, if they got a player that can play and they got a player at a pretty affordable price, why are you upset today? Like, what's your problem, right? How could you criticize this move? I think where the criticism comes in is that on a macro level, on a big picture level, this to me is indicative of the tax bracket that this team feels comfortable with being in at the wide receiver position. And what I mean by that is that they are comfortable paying Juju Smith-Schuster $10 million. They're comfortable with paying DeVante Parker, let's call it 7 or 8, which I think is what it will ultimately end up being. They are comfortable paying Kendrick Bourne his salary.
$6 million.
But they are never going to break outside of their model to overextend for a wide receiver. They're just not. And I think that the trend of the league that we have seen is that position, just like quarterback, just like other high-priced positions, corner, pass rusher, tackle, you get what you pay for. Now, if you use a first-round pick on a wide receiver, that's when the really talented guys are going, or at the top of the draft. The guys that are getting paid, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, those are the stars at that position. The Patriots, my concern is that they truly believe that this is enough, that the talent level is enough at that position, that what everybody else sort of perceives as an average to below average supporting cast, they're comfortable with mid, with fine. He plays a role. He's a big-bodied outside receiver that can win jump balls and use his size and his catch radius in his hands, and he plays a role. And that's all we need. We just need role players. And they still ignore the star power. And I think the other thing is they are too okay with this in multiple areas of the roster, especially on offense. I think you can make the same argument that they are married to mid at tackle. I think you can make the same argument when they paid Devon Godshaw that extension last year. They're cool with it. And I don't know if that's going to be enough for them anymore. We talk about it all the time. You know, Tom Brady's not walking through the door. He's not the one that's going to be elevating this thing anymore. You have to approach it a little bit differently because you're just like everybody else now. And that's my big picture concern with it. As much as I want to separate those two things, I don't mind DeVante Parker. I don't mind the contract. What I mind is what it tells me about how they view the position and how they view their spending model of the position. Are they going to sign DeAndre Hopkins next week and I'm going to eat crow on this a little bit? Maybe. Maybe they will. But something tells me that even if they do sign DeAndre Hopkins next week, that it'll be a good deal for them. It won't be top receiver money. He won't have that market, right? And it won't push $20 million a year. So they'll get DeAndre Hopkins, sure, and they'll get the name brand and they'll get the star power, but it will be for pennies on the dollar. So what do they really change in philosophy at that point? So that's where I'm at with DeVante Parker. In a micro level, fine contract, fine player. Macro level, we're settling for fine again. If that's all we're doing. If we're just routing into the season with this group, they're good with fine at the skill positions, and that's concerning that they don't see that, right? You know, that they don't see that wave of or that need to add more real premium talent.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some of that. I think the point about Hopkins, I don't think them getting him for a team-friendly deal is a knock. I wouldn't go that far. I think if he signs elsewhere for a team-friendly deal, the question is going to be, well, why couldn't they top that? That would be a valid concern. I do kind of think they needed to do this anyway. I don't totally disagree with your point of they've gone cheap at receiver, but they only had Smith-Schuster and Tyquan under contract for next year, like beyond 2023. So Parker gives them another guy. We're still waiting for them to. I guess my point would be I don't disagree with your overall philosophy in that, yeah, they haven't addressed the wide receiver position as aggressively as they probably should have in the last, I don't know, decade, like however far back you want to go, right? But this contract shouldn't change that.
Right.
This contract, they should be able to sign this contract and address the wide receiver position with a premium asset,
right,
whether that be a big contract or an established veteran or high draft pick. Okay, they weren't going to do that before they signed this contract.
I don't disagree, but
this doesn't change anything. They needed a third wide receiver. They signed a third wide receiver. My bigger issue with it, and again, we'll have to see what the details are.
Yeah.
I don't love signing a guy who's entering his age 30 season who has a history of injuries to a 3-year deal. Now, maybe only 2 of those years are guaranteed. That kind of changes the tenor a little bit, but That's my bigger knock. Like you said, when he was out there last year, he produced at times. He was really hot and cold. I think some of that was just the nature of the offense being very unfriendly to the passing game as a whole.
It's just a volatile offense.
Right. I'm looking forward to seeing him in the O'Brien offense. I'm like, I don't have a problem with the contract itself. Initially, I did because I thought it was going to take them out of the running for Hopkins. There's been multiple reports since that that's not the case. The whole bigger picture, how they address the wide receiver position, this has nothing to do with that for me. That was the case before they signed this contract. It was going to be the case if they didn't sign this contract.
I guess it hammers it home for me.
I don't even know that it hammers it home.
It's another example of it, though, and we go back to the draft, and they did the same freaking thing in the draft where they only used 6th-round picks on wide receivers.
Right, that hammered it home. What hammers it home is the fact that we're at this point and the instant reaction. So they brought back their third wide receiver, who is generally, he would be a better wide receiver than most teams' third wide receivers. I think we both agree on that, right?
Yeah.
They brought back a guy for third receiver money
who's
a very good third receiver.
Yeah.
You know what was trending yesterday on Twitter after that deal broke? DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
It was DeVante Parker was trending with DeAndre Hopkins because we Patriots fans can't wrap their minds around, right or not, can't wrap their minds around they are going to sign this deal, which is a good deal for the player that he is, and still pursue a true number one wide receiver.
Because I don't think that it's so much that fans can't wrap their head around that, because I think, I have another take on this involving that, but I think it's that would be so out of character for Bill to go ahead and pay Juju Smith-Schuster, basically lock in DeVante Parker, Parker, lock in Mike Gesicki, lock in Hunter Henry, and then add a fifth guy to that mix for decent money. It just would be very, very unlike them to do that. So I think fans are now preparing themselves for it not to happen because of this. It has nothing to do with the finances of DeVante Parker's contract. It's just the way that they operate. And I think the frustration part for me is really the best way to look at it is just like real cash dollars. Juju Smith-Schuster is making $10 million in cash this year.
Yeah.
DeVante Parker is going to probably come in at like 7 or 8 because of the bonuses and things like that. Kendrick Bourne's around, 6, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, but I think his cash is closer to 4.
So my point is that they have a hierarchy in that room.
Right.
And my concern is that they are not going to extend beyond ever, not just DeAndre Hopkins, ever being in the business of paying a receiver more than like $10, $11 million a year.
But all right, you mentioned
in real cash, not cap.
You mentioned the hierarchy thing. And by the way, Bourne's money is 4.7.
Right. So they have a clear.
Yes. And this in the past is why they haven't paid players at certain positions, because they didn't want to throw that out of whack. They do kind of set it, which it's weird because it runs contradictory to the idea that the best players are going to play.
Yeah.
And they've somehow squared the two where both things are true. And I don't really know how they've done it by paying only players who are truly sure things. And I mean like paying players who are really truly sure things. So Juju's at 11 in cash?
He's 10 in cash this year. At least when I looked last night. I looked quickly. So maybe.
So, but you can still get Hopkins for 12 and be fine. The thing is, they had so many guys like Rob Gronkowski who skewed the and maybe rightfully so, but skewed the window. You don't really have that anymore. No, Juju's at you're going by cap number.
I'm going at real cash.
Juju's 6.5.
6.5 of real cash. I think he's 6.5 cap number.
6.5. Oh, sorry, 6.5 base salary.
Yeah. What's his total cash outlay?
But the cash is not the cap number.
But the cash is the important number.
I know. Hang on, I'm trying to find it.
The cash is what
Miguel is like pulling his hair out, punching his TV, hearing us do this.
The cash is what Mr. Kraft, when he goes to write his checkbook or the direct
deposit
hits,
yearly cash. Juju Smith-Schuster, 10 flat. 10 flat. Okay.
So my point is that you
can't get okay. So here, no, I get what your point is. But here's my point.
They might be able to pay Hopkins if Hopkins' market is relative. My point is that they're top of the line. Their number one receiver rung on their ladder is I would say somewhere between $12 and $14 million. When the rest of the league is looking at it and saying really, really good receivers like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill level receivers are getting $25 million.
But here's where I'd push back on that. And so two things. First of all, if they do stick with that hierarchy, they should be able to land Hopkins because they should be able to give Hopkins more than $10 million in cash. They should.
They just had to pay DeVante Parker a little bit more because he was
They should.
butthurt about it. So
Secondly, when have they had a receiver that was worth $25 million? Or had a chance to pay a wide receiver? Like, that's my bigger problem.
I do not think that as long as
get that
Bill
guy in the
Belichick
door first, and then we can worry about paying him.
How? Because if you're not going to draft him, we've seen how that's gone for them.
But that's exactly my point. The issue isn't that they won't pay these guys. The issue is they can't get these guys in the door to pay them.
Well, that's therefore the only way to get one in the door is to pay him, right? Like the only way to get one in the door for the Patriots right now is to pull off a A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill type of trade because they're not getting it through the draft. And I have another sort of offshoot of this whole thing for me is what this says or what this does with Tyquan Thornton. And the way that I look at it is that they have a spending model at the wide receiver position, and they have a team building philosophy that the teams in the league that are spending $50 million against in real cash or even cap, like whatever one you want to use. I don't want to confuse everybody with that.
Yeah.
The teams that are spending a ton of money on wide receivers in their mind are doing it wrong. That's the concern that I have. And I go back to, just rehashing this whole thing because I said this on PU. I go back to Nick Saban and Nick Saban saying in like 2016 that Alabama had to change how they played football, that they couldn't be a ground and pound ball control offense with elite defense and win national championships anymore because these other teams across college football at the top of college football were lighting up the scoreboard. And I think that has trickled up to the NFL. I think that teams across the NFL are scoring at will and have quarterbacks and offenses that can put up 40 on you and like that.
But all right, but here's the counter to it. It doesn't have to be the quarterback. You have to pay somebody on offense. So again, I go back to the Niners, right? The Niners aren't winning because of the quarterback.
Correct.
They're not.
But the Niners have invested in other areas that this team won't do.
So that's my point. And this is more what bothers me than the wide receiver thing. You have to invest somewhere. The whole point about having the rookie contract, the quarterback on the rookie contract, is you invest elsewhere.
Yeah.
And they just haven't done that. They're operating like a team that's paying a quarterback a lot of money when they're not.
They're operating like a team that's paying a quarterback a lot of money, but in their eyes, they think that they're spreading the money around, right? So everybody's getting a little bit of it.
Yeah.
The defense is getting some of it. The offense is getting some of it. The special teams is getting some of it. And they still believe in depth, strong middle class, comparable talent all the way through the roster, and all of that is all well and good. But I think what it ignores is that was what made the dynasty era Patriots 10-win football teams.
Right.
But what made them 12 to 14 win Super Bowl champions were the stars.
Right.
Were Brady and Gronkowski and Edelman
yeah.
and the guys on defense. And that's what this team is missing. And those guys nowadays, the receivers are picking up that slack for a lot of these teams.
Yeah.
And this team just doesn't want to see that, or it just doesn't feel like they care about that.
We can have this conversation full once we know what happens with Hopkins. Because if they sign Hopkins, it doesn't undo all of this because they still should have been more aggressive on a long-term option. Whether we don't need to rehash all the Jerry Jeudy stuff, but they should have been more aggressive in that regard. But if they get Hopkins, they're in good shape.
So the point
they're
is,
not in the best
my
shape,
point
but
is
they're in
with
good
Hopkins, and I understand what you're saying my point is with Hopkins is that if Hopkins signs here, and let's say they sign him and the contract is like $12 million real dollars, right?
Yeah.
It's $12 million bucks. So he's ahead of Juju. He's ahead of Parker. He's number one on the pay scale, and he's number one in your programs and all that, right? the problem with that is that it's still below market value.
I'm not gonna fault a team for signing. Like I'm already
not faulting them,
or I guess,
but I'm saying they're not changing their stripes.
I've already done this. They should have paid him to not leave the building 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. They should. Yeah, I've said that. Beyond that, if you're gonna let him hit the open market, you don't need to necessarily bid against yourself.
Correct. And
I
I'm
think
not going to bash them for not doing that.
Right.
My point is, though, is that it's not. They're not changing the philosophy.
You're saying
position.
they let Hopkins come to them rather than going to get him.
Correct.
Yeah, but even if they did pay him, that would still be true because it's June 28th.
Yeah.
Or is it the 29th? It's June 29th.
What day is it?
And they're so I would argue, regardless of what they pay him, your point is true.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They didn't address it in the draft. They didn't address it in free agency. They didn't make a trade.
Right.
They're waiting until like 2 weeks before camp to do this. Then,
100%.
Then it doesn't change. The money's irrelevant to your point.
It is to an extent, but I think what I want to hammer home with the money is because I think that people hear this, my opinion on this, and when they sign Hopkins in 2 weeks, they're going to see, Evan, they paid the star receiver. They're not paying him a lot of money. Like, relative to the rest of the market,
I just don't care about that.
I do, because
if they pay him enough to get him, they paid him enough to get him. It's more they're letting this come down to the wire. There's one last guy available who does come with some red flags.
Yeah.
Like, it coming down, really the offensive season coming down to signing a guy after, at this point, who knows when he's going to sign, but let's just say for argument's sake, based on the reports, signing a guy after July 4th who does have red flags, who's over the age of 30, who's the last guy on the market, letting it get to that point, you don't need, the money doesn't matter there. The point is, they let the receiver come to them. They didn't go out and aggressively pursue adding the wide receiver, which we all agreed was a big thing they needed to do this offseason.
100%. And I think that's because it goes back to...
If anything, it's the opposite. If they end up giving him too much money, I would say that's the mistake because...
Sure.
Now you're going to overpay him because he's the last guy. You have no other options.
My whole point, though, is about philosophy, right? And about team building and how they view the importance of... I'll throw all of tight ends and receivers together. Pass catching talent, like how they view pass catchers and how important pass catchers are in the grand scheme of winning football games and winning championships and competing for titles. They still view that as a luxury, not a necessity. And if DeAndre Hopkins is available on June 29th and he'll take a deal that's reasonable because he is 31 years old and he does have some red flags and he is available late in the offseason, they'll take him. I think the same can be said, from everything that I've heard, and I think we've heard similar things about Dalvin Cook. They would take Dalvin Cook at the right price. And I'm not saying that you should overpay Dalvin Cook, but the point is that they'll take anybody at that price. Like if the price...
Okay, but I think it's two separate things. I have no problem if a good football player is available late in the summer saying, because at a certain point with guys, we talked about this with guys like Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
Hey, if you don't want to sit the season out, we'll take you.
Yeah.
I have no problem with just checking in on guys late in the summer. The bigger problem is coming into this offseason, and you said it off the top, it's not just a receiver where they do this. They've done it at other positions.
Yeah. Kind
of just bargain shopping, going for quantity over quality. Just the more guys we have, the higher the odds one of them sticks.
Yeah.
What were their two biggest needs going into the offseason? Their two biggest above all else. There wasn't a close three. It was wide receiver and tackle.
Yeah.
And here we are on June 29th, and what are their two biggest needs? Wide receiver and tackle. They did address corner, which was a need. I'll give them credit for that. But it's not a money thing. It's a positional impact thing.
Right. And I just, as an objective observer of this team, and as a Patriot fan, if I was a Patriot fan, I would look at this offense right now and I would say, we're going to go into this season. We're going to go into this season with DeVante Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, Kendrick Bourne as our receiver room. And we're going to go into this season with our starting tackles probably being Trent Brown and a 34-year-old Riley Reef. And our management and our football operations says, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we'll win with that. That's fine. Yeah. Right? No. To me, that's unacceptable. Like, to me, that's not good enough. And if in 6 months they're an 11-win team and they're playing on divisional round weekend because they won a wild card game, and like, I'll eat crow. I'll admit that I was wrong. But they're showing the 2010s Patriot thing is starting right now. And
I will be up at midnight watching the Belichick-Saban documentary. I promise.
And you
that.
look at Brady and Gronk and Edelman and McCourty and Revis and then Gilmore, and like, these players, defensively, I can talk myself into some of the guys, the younger guys, blossoming into that type of player. A Kyle Duggar, a Christian Barmore, Christian Gonzalez. Like, I can talk myself into that for everybody to not be totally negative Nelly right now. Where is that coming from offensively? And I look at this receiving core now too, and I want to spin it a little bit to Tyquan Thornton, because where does the dust settle for the let's just assume Hopkins is in the mix, and then we'll assume Hopkins is in the mix, but let's assume he isn't first.
Yeah.
You are now paying DeVante Parker, so he's playing.
Yes.
If he's healthy, he's playing.
Yes.
You're paying Juju Smith-Schuster. Same thing. Healthy, playing. You're paying both tight ends. So both healthy, both playing. So Tyquan Thornton, at best, at this point, is being viewed as the third receiver in true 11 personnel, maybe, if Kendrick Bourne isn't here.
It's him and Kendrick Bourne competing for that spot.
And forget about being on the field in 12 personnel. Unless it's a certain package or a certain situation where they're trying to hit something down the field, he's not going to be out there. So now you're blocking Tyquan. And you told me last night over text that I need to get over Tyquan, and maybe I do. But
No. That's not the full context. the full context was...
He's walking it back now, Murray.
No, I'm not walking it back. I'm giving the context.
Okay.
Because we were talking about it... So I know you said you wanted to put Hopkins aside, but we were talking about it in the context of if they sign Hopkins.
Then forget about it. He's like the fifth receiver.
Right, but here's my point. So what does it look like if they get Hopkins? I know we all thought Parker was the odd man out. We were wrong on that. Seemed like it made the most sense. Apparently they're going to go elsewhere. So you're going to have Parker at the X. Either way, Juju's in the slot. Juju was the least affected by all of this. The extension, signing Hopkins, anything. But so Juju in the slot, Parker at the X, Hopkins becomes the Z.
Yeah.
And then that, in effect, buries Tyquan Thornton. You have Thornton and Bourne are buried. Maybe Bourne becomes a cut candidate or a trade candidate, but Thornton is now like way down on the depth chart. Before, we thought it was Parker gets cut, Hopkins is the X, and Thornton and Bourne are still battling for that Z spot. And you said, don't bury Tyquan. You got to figure out blah, blah, blah. My counterpoint to that was, well...
You're giving up on Tyquan.
I'm not giving up on him.
You told me to give up on him.
My counterpoint was... They need to. We've talked about this at length. They need to figure out what the deal is with Mac Jones this year.
It's more important to invest in Mac Jones than Tyquan Thornton.
Right.
Yes.
And unfortunately, ideally, you would be able to do what's best for both, and what's best for both would be the same thing. They've kind of put themselves in a spot where that's not the case. What's best for Mac Jones is not what's best for Tyquan Thornton. It would be nice if they had a real year last year and we more or less knew who Mac Jones was, and they could maybe do some more stuff with Tyquan Thornton with Mac Jones supporting him. But we still don't know what the deal is with Mac Jones. They've got to get him help.
Yeah.
And that means not putting unestablished players in key roles. Could Tyquan break out? Absolutely he could. But are you willing to gamble on it? And that becomes the question.
So here's the thing. Sorry, I just did a double take because they showed Ryan Mallett throwing a pass to Julian Edelman.
I know, that was kind of creepy. I saw that
really
too.
Creepy. Anyways.
Rest in peace, by the way. That was
absolutely.
Sad. Yeah.
I said that in like a somber tone. I hope that came across because it's very sad.
Yeah.
With Tyquan, here's the thing. One, I think that we knew this. And I can't believe that you're the one telling me to give up on Tyquan when you were the one that told me about Tyquan. So I'm a little shocked by it. Just hear me out.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We knew coming in that he was raw.
Yeah.
That he's a 4.28. He flies down the field. He's super fast, explosive player. But his route running, all of it is raw. The whole technique side of it is the only way that player to me truly develops and figures it out at this level is if he plays.
You're not wrong. The problem is...
But they do this all the time. They do this across the roster.
I know they do.
They take 30-year-old DeVante Parker and they block a 23-year-old Tyquan Thornton with a veteran guy because the veteran guy has a higher floor, right?
Yeah.
And that drives me nuts. It does.
But the problem is, and I still think Tyquan Thornton can be a good NFL receiver. I really do believe that. Can they afford to find out whether or not that's true this year? Do they have the luxury? Do they have the wiggle room to figure that out? I'm not sure that. First of all, I think he's going to play because between Parker, Hopkins, if he's here, Juju Smith-Schuster's dealing with a knee injury.
There'll be injuries.
They're right. He's going to get on the field.
I don't want to. I get the depth. And I'm not saying I'm not anti-depth. I'm just saying
you don't want to count on injuries to get him on the field.
Yeah, I want him to play.
Right. I want him to play too. But I think it's more important. Isn't Mac Jones in the same spot? Isn't everything you just said about Tyquan, about, he's only going to get better by playing and you need to do this and that. It's all true about Mac Jones as well.
The problem is
that's what sucks.
I know, but the problem is
I don't love this take.
You know what you have in DeVante Parker. You know what he is in this league.
But isn't that kind of what you need to put around Mac Jones right now? Established players.
What I'm worried
That's
about,
what you need to put around a young
worried about is that this type of approach, and they do it all over the roster. It's not just at wide receiver. This type of approach is how you get stuck into NFL purgatory.
No, Evan, I'm with you on this. We've talked about
how you go 8-9 every year.
We've talked about the impact of burying Juwan Williams and how that maybe derailed him. And I know people just think he was bad. They buried him.
Yeah.
They had a lot of good corners, but they buried him. I agree with you on this.
Yeah.
This is just a unique scenario where you have two players in this spot where they both have to play in order to hit their ceiling, and I don't want to say one being on the field doesn't help the other because it's not like Mac's not going to be on the field, but you need to do what's best for the quarterback. Last year, and they did this to themselves.
But maybe
I don't love that this is where they're at, but I think this is where they're at.
Here's the thing, though: if don't give DeVante Parker this extension. He still plays here next year. In this coming up season.
But that's a different conversation.
And Juju's still going to play.
Yeah.
The tight ends are still going to play. The only difference to me, is that you're not married to Parker, where Tyquan now just has a bigger runway to potentially.
I'm totally with you on that.
And you just. To me, committing to this receiving core and committing to the veterans in this group and to committing to this tackle situation and all of it, to me, this spells you finishing 9-8. 9-8. Cool. Cool. Whereas if you put Tyquan Thornton on the field and all of a sudden Tyquan Thornton actually starts to figure it out at the NFL level, and Tyquan Thornton all of a sudden turns into a player for you, maybe your ceiling improves, right?
So,
maybe you get even better than what you would get
here.
But
I guess the question is, where's the and I don't, I'm not saying never play Tyquan Thornton either. That's not what this is. But I guess the question is, where's that line? Where's that line between you got to play him enough because maybe he breaks out, but you also can't just leave him out there and essentially leave Mac Jones with one less pass catcher. That's what they did at times last year with Nelson Aguilar.
Is that they are committed down these paths with guys like DeVante Parker. I mentioned Devon Godshaw last year, that extension. I love Dietrich Wise. Dietrich Wise is one of the most fun players on this team. Just getting to get to know him, at the level that we get to. But him too, his contract that they gave him a couple years ago too. My fear is that this regime knows that they carry enough goodwill with ownership that as long as they are competent and competitive and pushing for the playoffs, they'll continue to get to do things their way. And that, to me, their way is what I just outlined about their philosophy with the receiver position. No change is going to come from this because they'll win 9 games. They'll probably squeak into the playoffs, and maybe they're more competitive in the playoff game than they were in Buffalo a couple years ago. And they still get to approach it the same exact way. And that's my fear, is that it gets you stuck in this purgatory of doing the same thing and expecting better results. And I want to see them at least in some pockets of this roster, and I think they do it defensively, which is such the so fascinating to me, is that they do it in spots more so defensively. And I think that speaks to just the head coach and his background and being in defense. He feels like he can take more chances on that side of the ball because he knows he can coach them up, in terms of just taking chances on raw talent, But they just don't care. Like they just look at it and they're just like, it's fine. All we need is to be fine at receiver. All we need to be is fine at tackle, right? Adrian and Bill O'Brien will coach him up and we'll be fine. And I just don't think that we shouldn't accept that as being good enough. And we know how the draft works. We know how their success rate is at the draft, and they're showing Gronk highlights right now behind you. And I was trying to remember, like, when's the last time, outside of Gronk, when's the last time that they've have a homegrown skill player?
I mean, James White would be like after Gronk, I guess.
Okay, let's take running backs out of it, like receivers and tight ends.
No, but even still, James White was drafted in
2011, 2012.
So that's still 10. I don't think you need to take running backs out. That's 10 years ago.
So they're not.
I guess Ramondre. I should say Ramondre. But
so taking. Just looking at pass catching, just looking at tight ends and receivers, we know their history in the draft is
James White was 2014, so 9 years ago.
Is not great, right? It's the success stories are like Deion Branch, Gronk, obviously Hernandez, one season of Malcolm Mitchell, and like Julian Edelman turning from a 7th round quarterback into a Pro Bowl receiver, right?
Malcolm Mitchell all was what he was always going to be.
Right.
That's a weird one. We don't need to rehash all that question.
Here's my final point, and we'll take some calls, and we'll talk about. I do want to get to DeAndre Hopkins and how this impacts that in a little bit more detail. My whole point is this: the Patriots are going to need to find skill talent to put them over the top through the veteran market, and if they are only going to operate in this tax bracket at receiver, then the best that they could do, Alex, is 31-year-old DeAndre Hopkins. That's
the best that they could do is drafting one.
But what I'm saying is that I don't think they can. I don't have enough proof to feel like I trust them to be able to do that.
I do and I don't. They haven't really tried. Nikhil was the one shot in the last 10 years. And that's sort of the other
angle of it. It's both things, right? I don't trust them to evaluate it properly, and I don't trust them to do it.
That's fair.
So
you want all the skill position players in the last 10 years?
I don't really
that they've drafted?
No. Okay,
all right, we're doing this anyway.
Yeah.
All right, last 10 years. 2013, 2nd round, Aaron Dobson, 4th round, Josh Boyce. 2014, 4th round, James White, 7th round, Jeremy Gallen. 2015, 6th round, tight end, A.J. Derby. 2016, 4th round, Malcolm Mitchell, 7th round, Devin Lucien. 2018, first.
So we have some breaking news. Can I cut in here for a second? This is not DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Breaking news, though, on the Patriots front. They have another contract extension. You want to guess who it is? Don't look.
Is it one of the 3, young guys?
It's a defensive player. I wouldn't really call him young.
No, okay, so it's not like Onwenu, Duggar, Uche.
No.
It's not that group. No, not Jonathan Jones. They just signed him.
Juwan Bentley.
All right.
New contract extension for Juwan Bentley, a 2-year, $18.75 max deal, $9 million fully guaranteed. So Juwan Bentley gets paid. Juwan Bentley gets paid a little bit here in this deal. I got to say, I think Juwan Bentley is one of the most underrated linebackers in the league. I think that his skill set is, to so many people, prehistoric and antiquated that he doesn't get enough credit for how good he is at what they ask him to do. If you need somebody that's going to take on blocks, it's going to fill gaps, it's going to come downhill, that is going to compress space in the running game, Juwan Bentley is a really, really good throwback linebacker. He's one of the best in the league at what he does. Is he Fred Warner? Is he Matt Milano? No. He's not a rangy coverage linebacker, but as a hard-hitting Mike, what they want him to do, he's excellent in that role. So I really like this contract. I think that he's a super underrated player for them, and I'm glad that they're going to keep him in the mix, because the last thing I'll say about it, and hear your take on it, I think he's one of those guys that can step into a leadership role.
Yeah.
I think he's a true leader. I think he's born to do it. He's a multi-time captain in college. He's been a captain here. With Devin McCourty leaving, I think Juwan Bentley is one of those guys that you could see step up, maybe more a little bit of a quiet leader, intense.
Lead by example
Type of guy. So they lock up Juwan Bentley for a little bit longer here.
I like the move. He's also only 20. He just turned 27. I did not realize he was that young. It feels like he's been around for a while. Yeah, that's a good contract. I think that $19 million number is going to scare people. This is another one. Shout out to the agent. Is his agent the same as his agent?
I don't
CAA, and let's look up DeVante Parker's agent. But it's a good contract. I think the biggest thing with him this year, you lose Devin McCourty, not different agents. The biggest thing with him this year, that communication. And coaches have talked about it, players have talked about it. Losing Devin McCourty, having somebody who knows the defense inside and out, can communicate with all the other 10 guys, he's going to be key with that. Yep. He kind of helps now bridge you to the next – not just bridge you to the next gap. I mean, again, he's only 27.
He is the next gap to me.
Right. Well, it's only 2 years. I'm kind of surprised it's not more years. But, yeah, that's – I see the $9 million fully guaranteed, so that's – call it $4.5, $5 a year. His previous cap hit was $5, which was 15th in the league among linebackers, among inside linebackers. So if it's like a $5-6 million cap hit, he's going to be just outside the top 10. I'd say that's probably about right. That's probably about right to a favorable deal. Like you said, he's a more underrated player. I do think does have some situational limitations, but after you draft a guy like Marte Mampu, you roll with those two guys. It's only a 2-year deal, but the next 2 years, that's your middle linebackers. You've got a very complete duo right there for what's probably going to be about, I'd say, under $10 million between the two of them.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I just think, look, I understand that people want them to get faster at linebacker, and he's not. He's much better in coverage than he was early on in his career. He's really improved his instincts and his recognition in coverage to basically max out his athletic ability in space and in coverage, which I give him credit for.
Yeah,
I think he's really improved in that area of his game. And he's not the rangy sideline to sideline guy. He's not going to go trace down Josh Allen, on a scramble or something like that. But they still play a ton of odd front. They still play a ton with open gaps on the line of scrimmage, right? Odd front, 3-4. You're going to have the B gap is going to be a bubble. It's going to be uncovered, right? There's not going to be a body in there on the line of scrimmage. If you're going to play like that to the strong side of the formation, you have to have a linebacker that can take on that gap. Yeah. And he's still one of those guys. I've been saying it since they drafted him until I'm blue in the face. I want to see them pair this now with Marty Mapu at the second level next to Juwan Bentley. Now you got your thumper and you got your chaser, right? Like that's the combination that we're looking for here. Both guys don't have to be the Fred Warner, right? Like you can have sort of complementary skill sets even at an off-ball linebacker position. I think this is interesting that they do this again. So he was a free agent, pending free agent.
Yep.
So my guess is that this deal is similar to what they just did with DeVante Parker, where they're ripping up this year and then they're giving him an extension through next year. So my guess is that he's now going to be a 2025 free agent.
I think they're tacking it on, actually.
Interesting. So
I think he's going to be a 2026 free agent, just based on the initial. I don't know. I'm so bad with the contract language.
Yeah, look, this is one of the other one of the gripes that I have is with how these are reported. So,
right, does 2-year extension mean on top of this, or is it
because DeVante Parker's deal was a redo.
Was it restructure?
They ripped up this year and then added 2 more years to it.
Right. So that's the thing. Restructure and extension mean 2 different things.
Yeah.
So Parker's was a restructure.
It was a new deal. It's a completely new contract.
This one, it would not surprise me if it's an extension. Just because he is only 27. He is such a core part of what they do. Yeah. Why would you only add 1 year?
Yeah.
For a guy who's 26, you don't want to have to pay a guy who's 28. That's when they're really asking for the big money. You get him to 29. And
maybe not at that position is sort of turning into running backs where 28 29, the cliff kind of comes.
So you think maybe they're just going year by year with him after?
I think that maybe the longevity of it, like look at what Bowman and Kuechly and all those, they all retired by 30.
Yeah.
So that's just sort of the way that this position is going.
For what it's worth, Ian Rappaport. So he reported initially. And then in a follow-up tweet, he said, yesterday it was DeVante Parker. Today, linebacker Juwan Bentley. New England Patriots reward 2 key players with big new deals, ... and opens up a bit of cap space as well. He
keeps on putting that little teasy tease in there.
He keeps using that qualifier.
So
is he just making us dance for the likes, or does he know something?
He's trying. He is. He's clout chasing right now. But I will say this one more thing about Juwan Bentley. I like the fact that, and look, this doesn't fit with DeVante Parker to me, but with Bentley specifically,
these are 2 different deals.
With Bentley specifically, I think one of the things that we've talked about and we've hashed out, and I know Deuce and I have talked about this too on PU, is sort of that committing to a next regime and like sort of committing to a new core of players. And to me, this suggests that Juwan Bentley is going to be a part of the next core, of this new core of Patriot. Yeah. And at some point, you couldn't keep recycling pieces. Like you couldn't keep going back into the well and back into the well and back into the well. At some point, you had to stick with some people. And I was mainly talking about this with the 2020 draft class, like with Duggar and Uche and Onwenu, like pay a couple of those guys, like keep some of those guys around, build something, like have some pillars, have some foundational pieces. I think that this is a step towards that with Juwan Bentley. I think this is one of those guys that they view for the next 3 or 4 years, I think is what it's going to ultimately be. This is a pillar piece for us. This is a foundational piece, a leader, a captain, a guy that we feel good about representing the organization. I like this for the Patriots for several reasons. I know there's going to be those people out there, Alex, that they need to, way to get faster, way to adapt.
They're going to see the $19 million over 2 years, and they're giving $10 million a year to a slow linebacker, and they won't even give it to a receiver. Not at all what this is. That is not it. And by the way, can I give a little PSA here, just in general?
Yes.
It can apply to Parker. It can apply to this. It can apply to anything. You do not have to react to an NFL contract instantly. We don't even have to do it, and it's our job to react. You are totally allowed to say, I'm going to wait and see the structure and then form my opinion. Totally allowed to do that. You can say, I like the player. I'm glad they're keeping him around. I don't like the player. I wish they would have just let him walk. You do not have to react to the up to dollar amount, because it's not a real. That's like buying a home security system to keep the tooth fairy out. Nice. It's not real. Yes, buying a home security system might be a good idea.
Maybe now is the time for this, because
it's
you just set me up for it. I have a real issue, real issue about how contracts are reported in the NFL, because it's funny money. It's not real. It's fugazi. Fugazi. It's not real. Okay, and this is disservice. The agents think that they're doing a service to their clients by doing this, and I think it's the total opposite. I think the agents are doing a total disservice to the player, because what happens is DeVante Parker, who caught 31 balls for 500 yards last year, gets 3 for 33, and then the Patriots and the player get ripped. And they say, fans that, not picking on fans, you guys shouldn't know the minutia. Go do what you do with your lives. Leave that up to us, right? Like, I'm not blaming you for not knowing. But the point is that fans look at that and they say, they're giving 3 years, $11 million per year to DeVante Parker, right? And that's the reaction. When in reality, it's probably like a 3-year deal that's really a 2-year deal that's maybe worth $7 million per year. Maybe. And this paints the player, it paints the team in a negative light. It doesn't do anybody a service. It does a disservice, and we need to be better about it, because all it does is it just, people grab the pitchfork and they say they did this, what, and then we get people, oh, well, why wouldn't they just give that money to Jacoby Myers, right? Like, we do this whole thing with it. Be better. Like, show us the details. Actually report on what the base value of the contract is, not the max value, but the base value, because that's the real money. Is DeVante Parker going to make All-Pro? No, he's not making All-Pro. if DeVante Parker has an incentive in his contract that's 1,000-yard season next year, he ain't hitting it. He's not getting the money. So that is, again, a disservice to everybody involved. The only person that it potentially makes look good is the agent, and more importantly, it's Rappaport, it's Schefter, it's all these insiders giving an olive branch to the agent so that the agent will feed him scoops down the road, right? Like it's, I'll make you look good, and therefore the next one that you break, like I'll give it to you again, right? And that's just, it's not a good way for fans, because the fans look at it and they get all caught up in the money, and it doesn't look good for the player. It doesn't. It makes the player look overpaid. And I don't think that's fair. I'll get off my soapbox now. We'll take some calls, and we'll talk about DeAndre Hopkins, because, again, another move that hints at cap space from Ian Rappaport. So we'll get to that in a second. But, Spee, if you're still there, I'm sorry for keeping you on hold. We were a little bit jacked up today. What's going on?
Not a problem. Good to be jacked up. Very good job at the helm today, Evan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I like the phrase you used on Pages Unfiltered. You said they're content with okay at wide receiver. Thought that kind of stuck, and I agree with you. I find it frustrating, like you. It's just years and years of that. But I think you might disagree with me on this next thing. See, at the same time, I think that the offense is good enough this year, like for it to be put up or shut up time for Mac. Like the litmus test is still on, because if Mac isn't significantly better than his rookie year, it's not about getting broken last year. It's not about not having enough weapons. It's that he's probably a journeyman more than a franchise quarterback. And I'm just preemptively frustrated with the rationalization. Like Pollyanna's 7 months from now, explaining away Mac's limitations and saying Bill David card him, But it's year 3, the litmus test is on, and I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do, Spee. And thanks for the call, and we're just going to go through some of these calls. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do agree with that to an extent. I think that he needs to play a certain level of football this year.
Yeah,
of course. I agree with that, and I would say that the absolute sort of baseline for Mac is his rookie season, but I'm actually expecting him to be even a little bit better than that. But what I'm not expecting is for him to throw 35 touchdown passes and be like a pseudo MVP candidate, because they haven't given him the pieces to be that good.
And that's what hurts. I kind of spent last year saying, why are we so focused on Mac can't produce in this offense that was set up for him to fail?
Yeah.
Why are we judging him off of that when that shouldn't be the long term?
Right.
Well, if he's in another offense that's set up for him to fail, it's unfortunate that they can't make it work with a quarterback who should be an NFL quarterback. But if that's what it's going to be, then he's not the guy. If they're going to keep asking just an insane amount of their quarterback, then it is what it is. They shouldn't do that. But if that's what it is, again, where he said explaining away Mac's issues with this and that, I wasn't trying to explain away Mac's problems last year. I was telling you what was happening.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no doubt that Mac should play like a starting quarterback this year, that they have enough around him, both personnel-wise and especially with Bill O'Brien in the building, that he should be at least back to where he was his rookie season. And if he's not, then they have real big issues with him, that they might need to look to move on sooner rather than later, like Baker Mayfield him almost, right? So that's going to, I hope that doesn't go down that road. I'm just saying that's what you're looking at if that does happen. If he puts up another bad season or doesn't even make it the full year as the starter, then we're talking about moving on from him after next year, not even the 5th-year option and all that stuff. But I actually think that with what he has around him, and this is sort of goes back to my bigger point earlier in the show, I feel like the only thing that I can expect from him is comparable to his rookie season to maybe a little bit marginally better. I don't think that I can expect him to put up ridiculous numbers or to be the driver of multiple wins, because of the offense, and they're putting up 35 and winning games like that.
But can he be good? He just needs to be good enough to not lose them games. That's basically where it's at, because they have a good enough defense. If they add Hopkins, they should have enough playmakers that if he just doesn't make mistakes, they're going to be in pretty good shape. In theory. Right.
And I think that to Spee's point and to other people's points that I think are aligned with Spee, I don't want to speak for Spee, but I think that to them, good enough and like not losing them games isn't going to cut it for most people, right? Like they need better than that out of the quarterback, and I can hear that. But
well, if they're winning games, people won't. Winning cares all. If they're winning games, people won't care. If Mac's playing well enough to not lose them games, and there's bad things happening elsewhere, the tackle play doesn't hold up, or the depth evaporates at cornerback, then it's going to be a very interesting conversation.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to Sean in Vancouver. What's up, Sean?
Hey, I have a few things, guys. Now, when it comes to this contract there's two contracts right now to talk about. I'm happy about Bentley because I was a huge Gerard Mayo fan. I still have the jersey, and I see him kind of stepping into those footsteps. And maybe one day he'll actually coach after football. But right now, I'm happy that he's with the Patriots. So, but the other contract, Parker, I kind of see it a different way. Like I see them freeing up money with that, and that gives me hope that they will sign Hopkins. And also, my concern is less about players being knocked out from each other in terms of the hierarchy. It's because there's so many injuries. I'm not concerned about that. Parker loses time for injuries. Hopkins probably will as well. Juju loses time. Everyone's out. So having 5 real starters, I don't think you're really threatening Thornton if he's healthy to be on the field as much. And then last week when I called in, my point about the left tackle when I was saying Brian Holloway, or it doesn't matter if it's him or Leon Gray. My point is I'm really concerned about left tackle, and it's not even like, is it fine? I don't think it'll be fine. Right now I'm concerned, like I don't even know if Trent Brown's going to play. It's a problem, and if there's a left tackle situation where you're not giving Mac any time, you're just done for. You need to have at least fine, but I'm not even certain about that.
Yeah, no,
so that's all my stuff.
No, Sean, it's a really fair point, and I said it in my rant about the receivers, and I said it, that I'd throw tackle into this category too. They have told us at every step of the way, Alex, this entire offseason, that they're cool with their tackles. They said it before the draft. They said it after the draft. And now we're in a position, and look, I don't want to get mad and all worked up about something that hasn't happened yet in terms of they don't play games in June. Like, let's see what it looks like once it starts to come together in camp. The one thing that you can say about offensive line play is that good coaching, good scheme, a 5-man unit that plays on a string, and like the sum of the parts can be greater than the individuals, right? At that position. I don't think you can say the same necessarily about receiver or other spots on the roster, and that's maybe why I'm so strong about it. But offensive line, we've seen them, like, I know Scar's not walking through the door, but we've seen them get by with what might be perceived as lesser talent, but they're able to coach it up and put it together, and everybody's seeing it through the same eyes, and it looks a lot better. So I want to give some patience to that, but the way that they've approached tackle from a team building standpoint is the same freaking thing they're doing at wide receiver. I blame it it's the same thing. Yeah. And
I mean, it really goes back Isaiah Wynn and N'Keal Harry, boom, boom.
We talked about, our whole thing was like sign one, draft one, but we were not talking about signing one being Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson and drafting one being hoping that City Sal can play tackle. Like, they did what we told them to do, but they did it like at the dollar store, right? They didn't do it. And this was actually a year. And look, I'm not trading Christian Gonzalez for Broderick Jones. I'm fine with that.
I'm not either.
But this was actually a year in free agency where the tackle market was pretty good.
So I go back to this question. Somebody asked, this came up on another show, I forget exactly how it was phrased, but basically, right now, assuming they were both free agents, who would you rather have? DeAndre Hopkins, for the money it's going to cost him, DeAndre Hopkins or Caleb McGarry?
This goes back to like is pass pro more
DeAndre Hopkins? No, but
I would probably say DeAndre Hopkins.
See, I would take the tackle, and the reason I bring it up that way, it's not, if they pay McGarry or Juwan Taylor or Mike McGlinchey or any of those names we mentioned back in the spring, if they pay any of those guys, we're not doing Hopkins right now. We're just not having that conversation. They don't have the money. These are their guys. They're wide receivers they have. I would be okay with that. I would actually be okay with that at this point.
it's the tackle situation is frustrating. And again, I want to, and I'll say this about receiver too, to a lesser degree, because that to me is like more philosophy than anything. But with tackles, let's see how it looks, because I've seen them figure it out with guys that are not first round prodigies, right? Like
right. You've seen them make it work without Joe Thomas.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see how it plays out. But I'm fully on board with saying that they kind of neglected that position in terms of let's go out and aggressively get a plug-and-play starter, whether it was early in the draft or whether it was a McGarry or a McGlinchey or an Orlando Brown. They had cap space. They had a need. They easily could have backed up the Brinks truck for Orlando Brown like Cincinnati did and said, done, right? Like left tackle taken care of. Don't need to worry about it. Instead, we're in a position where it's going to basically be an open competition between four guys, McDermott, Reif, Anderson, Trent Brown, and you just like hope that two of those guys end up being competent. Like that to me is not great team building. It's not. It's at least at that position, and we'll see what happens.
So real quick, let me throw this in. Multiple of our colleagues, Patriots reporters, simultaneously tweeting that the move opens up cap space. A couple that mentioned Hopkins, maybe hearing something.
Yeah. So let's talk about Hopkins for a second. We do have some calls still to get to.
Yeah.
As soon as the Juwan Bentley thing happened, the phone started to light up a little bit. So we'll get to all your calls here in a second. But I do want to talk Hopkins. Financially, the Patriots could afford DeAndre Hopkins before all these extensions, and they can afford him even more now. But I don't think that it really tells me much about DeAndre Hopkins is, the hope of him being here.
Can I tell you what it does do with all this? So part of the reason we all thought Parker was a logical cut was, all right, they had $14 million in cap, you sign Hopkins to 12. And everybody's like, oh, they still have $2 million. Well, you need about $5 million to get through the season. You don't spend right down to zero. And it was, all right, so if they pay Hopkins 12 and they cut Parker, they only use up 6, they're still in good shape. They extended Parker. It wasn't so much, they can't both play together. It's, all right, well, now where are they going to get this money from? Well, now they've started to open that money up. So this, I don't know that it doesn't impact them signing Hopkins. They still should be just as aggressive in that as they've been. I think they're still just as likely to do it. What this does do is that odd man out conversation, which now I think focuses on Kendrick Bourne, becomes more about just in terms of playing time rather than a roster spot.
Yeah. And the DeVante Parker thing tells me that DeVante Parker's not going to be the odd man out. That's all it tells me, really, on the surface in terms of the small picture, the short term. With DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think financially the Patriots are any less likely to sign DeAndre Hopkins or more likely than they were yesterday. I also don't think that DeAndre Hopkins has made up his mind or is out on the right. I still think that the Patriots are very much in play for DeAndre Hopkins. My one concern is I don't totally love how all the pieces fit together, and I tweeted out earlier some next gen stuff. They do some cool stuff about like receiver splits and alignments and things like that. And basically what you're looking at with Parker and Hopkins, and even Hopkins last year, even Hopkins, in the last year with Bill O'Brien in 19, Hopkins has been a max split outside the numbers receiver, an X receiver, his whole career. And so has DeVante Parker. So what you're looking at, and DeVante Parker is not moving inside. His skill set just doesn't fit it, right? So he's staying on the outside. So I think what you're looking at is really DeAndre Hopkins changing roles a little bit, which, okay, fine. Like, they'll make that work. Bill O'Brien will make that work. And so it won't be the Julian Edelman slot receiver or the Jacoby Myers slot receiver or a Z receiver, I should say. It'll be a little bit different than that. Fine. But what it does tell me, or what it does to the Patriots, it makes them really reliant on, like, the same type of skill set across the board. And does that concern you at all? Because it concerns me a little bit, like not to the point where I'm saying like don't sign DeAndre Hopkins. Like obviously you take it on and you figure it out and you hope for the best. But now you're really, really reliant on like contested catches, body control, hands, like guys adjusting to footballs, wearing coverage. Like there's no separator amongst this group. none of them. The Juju, Hopkins, Parker, not separators. And what you're telling me is, in more than likely, is Tyquan is going to have a lesser role probably, and Kenderport might not even be here. And those are your two best natural separators, right? Those are the guys that actually can create space and get themselves open consistently. So what I have concerns about is that you are really going all in on one type of receiver at that point. You're going to be a physical, power, big-bodied, contested catch group. And maybe that works out for them.
Look, you know me. I like smash mouth football, so you've got me all hot and bothered talking about that.
You think so?
As for personally, I enjoy watching that style of play. I enjoy watching a guy just body the defender and just
I'm
throw
the
him out of the club.
You know that.
I know you like all the finesse. You were in
LA.
I
was in LA.
You like that. You like Hollywood football. You like Hollywood football.
I love the dancing.
You're more Pac-12, even though you hate the Pac-12. You're more Pac-12. I'm more SEC. Here's my point.
I would take in a heartbeat. I would take Tyreek Hill over like maybe anybody besides DeVante Adams, right? Like that to me.
So it's funny. I was going to say I would take DeVante Adams, I know he's separates.
But DeVante Adams separates too. So like, and that's the thing is like.
So all right, I would take Rob Gronkowski over Tyreek Hill.
Okay. None of these guys are as good as Gronk, but okay.
I'm trying to think of who. There aren't that many guys like that anymore. I mean, you go back. Obviously, like Randy Moss could do everything, but I think I'll take the guy that Moss's corners, assuming like same level of talent, they're both capable of like 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah,
I'd rather watch a guy get. I'd rather watch a corner get mossed than watch a corner get burnt.
Okay,
personally,
that's fair.
I find that more entertaining. Now, is that the better option in today's NFL?
Yeah,
that's a different question.
So the biggest thing,
but I'm just saying stylistically, it's more appealing to the eyes. Here's my point.
Yep.
Here's my point. How do you feel? All right, so like down the field, they're not going to separate. You don't love them pulling away from a defender down the field.
Yep.
How do you feel about their ability to create instant separation off the line of scrimmage, to get off the line of scrimmage and beat press and get open like that, even if they can't sustain that?
I think that Hopkins is underrated in that regard.
Okay.
I think he can do that.
Yeah.
I don't really think that that's the other two's games.
What about Bourne? All right. Well,
So
they're not going to play.
playing.
We've established that.
Yep.
I think their offense is going to be a lot of quick hitters. I don't think they're going to be asking guys to get open 2 to 3 to 4 seconds into a route.
I think Juju does it through scheme, right? Like he does it through, alignment, rub routes, like things
motion, which I think we're going to see a lot of.
Right, things that get him off the line freely, and then he's a great catch and run player, no doubt.
Yeah.
I think Hopkins is really underrated in his release package and how he's able to move guys off their spots and get open in that regard. So I think that there's some of that, and maybe I'm open to that a little bit. I
don't think they're going to have these long developing like double move routes. I don't think that's what their offense is going to be. I think it's going to be hit the quick slant, Mac, throw it 2 feet in front of them, and use that length because they're kind of big at wide receiver
they would
now.
Be really
they got
big.
Which happened very quickly because they were not big the last couple years.
Look, Tyquan is like 180 pounds soaking wet, but he's 6'2".
And he's got long arms.
Yeah,
I don't know what his wingspan is, but I should be above average for 6'2". I think it's going to be, all right, hit that quick slant, right, or off RPO or something, and just Mac, throw it out in front of him. And the idea is the receiver's longer than the corner, and he can go out in front and catch the ball. When we talk about separation, you've heard me do this rant before. I haven't done it in a little bit. But when we talk about separation, there's two kinds of separation. There's spatial separation and there's physical separation.
Yeah.
Spatial separation is what everybody thinks of in terms of separation. How many yards away are you from the corner? And we saw the Patriots were on the wrong end of physical separation last year. When one wide receiver is 6'3" with a massive wingspan and the corner's 5'10", corner can be standing right next to him, and there's still separation. You got to be able to place the ball in a certain spot, but that Mac Jones is accurate. That's what he does. He doesn't have the big arm to throw it down the field.
Because I've been negative today, I'm going to give Bill a bone for a second. How generous of me.
So kind of you.
Oh, my God. How kind of me.
Oh,
wow. We're
making up.
We're going to hug it out. It's going to be great. Here's the thing. Is there an argument to be made, because we play chess and not checkers here, that maybe they look at it and say, well, the league is made up of a lot of finesse corners.
Right, corners are getting smaller.
smaller, faster corners to
Yeah.
measure up against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and DeVonta Smith and all these, explosive, smaller, type of receivers. So we're going to be 6'5" across the board. We're going to have Gesicki and Henry and Parker and Hopkins and even Tyquan's got some length, right?
Tyquan's tall. Yeah.
And he's tall Reek.
Yeah.
And we're going to we're going to out-muscle you. We're going to out-jump you. We're going to do all. Sure. I think the biggest thing is why I get so obsessed with separation. First of all, it's fun. Okay, like if you want to break down like receiver play, the best thing to break down is a dude like Devontae Adams who just breaks ankles.
See, but this
right?
is
like
this is where I have more fun.
Fun.
I want to watch Adams, or honestly, as good as he is as a route runner, this is a bad example because he does separate. You know what my favorite Justin Jefferson play was? It's not him putting a corner on skates. It's that catch against Buffalo where he goes up and reaches behind.
I'm all about the dance.
No, give me that catch all day. Give me winning at the catch point all day.
It's all about at the line of scrimmage. Everything in football and like training receivers, and I do talk to some of the receiver trainers because I'm obsessed with receivers. Everything like about receiver training right now is the release. Like it's release. Like that's all that these guys
But the release
drill.
can still factor into this. If you're 6'5", you don't need 5 yards of separation to be open.
Yeah,
if DeVante Parker just has one step on a guy, and the guy covering him is 5'10", and he's 6'3", he's open. The metrics aren't going to show him being open, but he's open.
So speaking of the metrics, first of all, I just
want
to...
But do you agree with that point?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you made the point about the smaller corners because I was essentially trying to say that, and I don't know why I didn't just say it outright.
So
the corners are smaller. They're getting bigger at wide receiver. Guys can be open even if they're not leaving a corner in the dust.
So here's
even
the
if
thing.
you don't like watching it as much.
I have two things for you here. One, next-gen separation metrics, like the ones that Warren Sharp tweeted out yesterday, not to pick on Warren Sharp again, that he tweeted out about DeVante Parker being near the bottom of the league in like 3 straight years and yards of separation at the target, light it on fire and throw it in the goddamn trash. Irrelevant. No actual football translation whatsoever. They're fun, they're cool, they're gimmicky, they're new agey, right? Like all those things. In terms of actual football, it's meaningless. Alex, who was like right around. So everybody tells me that DeAndre Hopkins can't separate anymore, right? That's the big knock. Can't run anymore. Doesn't run by anybody anymore. Can't separate. DeAndre Hopkins.
Dude, I've done that so many times last couple.
I know it's tough. DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Brown in yards of separation at the target, according to Next Gen Stats, it's identical.
Right.
They're both 2.6 yards. So do you think A.J. Brown can't separate? Or maybe you just think the metric is bullshit, right? Like, and that's where I'm going with it. So here's the thing. The one thing I'll say.
Swore again.
I did. Sorry, Matt. Twice.
You're mad today.
I am mad.
And you gave Bill credit. You're mad, yet you gave Bill credit. Like it could even be worse.
I am mad because I want to see some offense. I don't want to have to go through another football season like last year.
Why is corners getting mossed, not offense?
Okay, it doesn't matter. Here, I'll tell you why it does matter. The one thing that we can look at that is really consistent year to year in terms of production. And I get that maybe your rebuttal is, well, I don't really give a shit about 2026.
There it is
right
again.
Now. Wow, what is wrong with me today? I don't really give a crap about 2026. Fair. But year to year, the separation guys, like the route runners and the burners, those guys are a lot more stable in terms of their production. So when you're looking at it from like a team building perspective, it's probably more important in that vein than it is in like, winning games, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like if one guy puts up 100 yards, the other guy puts up 100 yards, how you got to 100 yards is irrelevant, right? Yeah. But the thing is that when you're looking at it from a team building perspective, in the draft, especially, the separators are the guys that translate the most and the guys that go on to be productive in the league the most, right? Like, you can just look at the case-by-case basis, N'Keal Harry versus the other receivers. What was the difference between N'Keal Harry and Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown and, all those guys? The one guy can't separate, right? And so I think that's true about separation. The other thing is, and this is my bigger question for you and for the panel here, which is 2 people and Matt, is this type of offense, and I get what you're saying about the quick hitters, and if these bigger receivers can create that quick separation, then maybe it's irrelevant. But is this type of offense of jump balls, back shoulder throws, like all this type of stuff, is that what's best for Mac Jones? Because the Mac Jones that I saw at Alabama was throwing to John Mechie and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, right? He's throwing to a much different type of receiver than DeVante Parker. And I've always wanted them to try to build Alabama, right? And they have Bill O'Brien, they have the quarterback, but at receiver, they're doing it very different. Alabama does not, it was in their prime, right, with Mac, was not made up of DeVante Parkers. So do you think that this type of offense is truly what's best for Mac? Because I have some reservations about that, because in order to really get the most out of these, like, you know, body control, hands, contested catch guys, you need to be able to put the ball in the only place that that old cliche, right? Like the only person that could catch this was the receiver. And it's not, it's line drive throws. It's not like the balloons down the field. It's not the crossing routes. It's not the touch passes. Those are like, back shoulders need to be seeds. Like you need to throw that with some velocity. You need to throw that outside the numbers. You know, jump balls down the field, you need to throw that with some distance under the ball. Is it what's best for Mac Jones to build the offense this way?
Probably not. But this is the course they're on, and you can't half and half it. You can't half and half it. So for them to change course now, it's too late. I think for the position they've put themselves in, this is what they have to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I could go back 2 years, again, I would have traded for Jerry Jeudy.
Right.
But they didn't. They didn't. So where they're at right now, yeah, I think you go all in on the size thing. You go out and get Hopkins, and you just force teams to play super big at corner and just catch. You basically.
You want to be like that sixth grader on the schoolyard that's just bigger, faster, stronger than everybody.
And it's also that element, and you talked about this, and maybe this is just recency bias because of something I'm having recency bias. Something I read the other day. There was this. I sent it to you.
Bennett said it's sometimes him that has the recency bias.
No, it's just this one thing. I read this really interesting piece on The Athletic from Bruce Feldman, who's a college football writer. I sent this to you about how defensive coordinators on air raid teams go about coaching day to day, week to week, year to year. And did you get a chance to read it?
I haven't yet.
Okay, so you should read it. There's a big section about how it's not one of the toughest things for them to do is the personnel is built so specifically for an air raid team. You don't have tight ends. You only have certain kinds of receivers. You don't do certain things that there are looks that they're simply not going to see throughout spring camp, throughout the summer, week to week, that they just have to get into a game and see.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the Patriots should be air raid, but to apply it forward, we talked about corners are smaller because receivers are smaller and quicker. The Patriots are going to give teams things that they are not going to see and they may not be prepared to practice for.
Okay.
I don't know that that's the ultimate way to go about building a Super Bowl winning team, but at the where they've put themselves, that is not a horrible path to go down and basically say, we are going to, and it's worked to a certain extent. This is kind of what the early Lamar Jackson offenses were built on, was there was no way to prepare for that.
Yeah, I just feel like,
and I think
I just
Patriots
wish I think the quarterback would be better off with separators.
I think he would, but that ship sailed
and I'm not saying
6 months ago,
again,
not a year ago.
Like I said earlier, I'm not saying don't sign DeAndre Hopkins because you're right. You got to take the best players available, and he's the best player available,
right.
And you make it work, and you figure it out later. But I don't love the main thing that I don't love about it, and I always pound the table for separation. But I think what the other element of it is like there's nobody, unless you somehow still find a way to get Tyquan Thornton meaningful snaps. There's nobody taking the top off, and
so
and that's not even about like that I need the deep ball in the offense. Yeah. It's just about space. Right? No, it's about creating space.
Yeah, in
like how are you going to get the safeties off the middle of the field?
But I would have gone back, trade for a guy like Jerry Jeudy, all those guys we talked about in the draft last year, Evan, Sky Moores and Calvin Austin and guy like that, like those are the guys that would have put around Mac Jones, absolutely. But this is where they're at. I think the idea is it's going to be quick.
Okay,
it's going to be.
Okay,
it's just
but
going to be quick, and that's how they're going to win.
How do you get the slants and the digs and the crossers? How do you get those routes open if no defense in the world is afraid of anybody running by them?
Right, running tight ends up the seam. You're not stretching the field on the boundary. You're stretching, and that is an Alabama thing. They did it.
You're making a good point there.
And that is what they did. Now they did it with Jameson Williams. They did it with burners, not tight ends. Again, they're doing it by being bigger rather than being faster. But you're going to run.
If you're telling me and you're talking me into that Gesicki is going to be a legit seam runner, like it's going to be a problem.
He should be. I mean, I don't know how that's how I would do it.
Yeah, then I could see where you're coming from.
Because that's Matt. We know Matt can throw the seam go.
Yeah,
we know that's one of his best routes.
Yeah, that's just my biggest thing. I don't need Tyquan Thornton to have a 1,000-yard season.
Right.
I need Tyquan Thornton to take the safety with them down the field.
To keep the safeties honest. Yeah, and that's been their problem for years is they can't keep teams honest deep. But if you have Mike Gesicki running the seam from the slot deep, and you're bringing DeAndre Hopkins, or you're bringing Juju Smith-Schuster, or you're bringing DeVante Parker in behind him on a slant, you're just going to create empty space there, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be just hitting that slant, and you can build RPOs into this, obviously, but it's going to be hitting that slant until eventually that safety comes up, and then you throw the ball to Mike Gesicki or Hunter Henry or Tyquan Thornton or whoever you have running that seam.
I'm at least open to it.
I'm not saying it's going to be the most revolutionary offense in the world, but the pieces are there to put that together. And I don't know that it's the best offense for Mac Jones, but it is a good offense. It's a good offense for Mac. It's a good offense for Mac Jones.
It's a real offense for Mac Jones.
It's something that builds to maybe not all of his strengths, but some of his strengths compared to last year, which played to none of his strengths.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's clear the phones here, and we'll wrap it soon. Patty in Agawam, what's up, Patty? How you doing?
Good. What's up, guys?
Hey.
I got 2 quick points and a question. First point is I hope Kyle Duggar is the next guy that gets the extension. Point number 2, Alex, I'm with you. The fact that Rodney Harrison is not in the Hall of Fame, to me, is absolutely disgusting. For many years, Aeneas Williams was in over Ty Law, and I could never understand the logic behind that. I can't believe that guys like Brian Dawkins and, Polamalu was great. Ed Reed was the best safety I've ever seen, but Rodney Harrison absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Here.
And my question, just to sort of expound upon what I talked about on PU, Evan, because I had to wrap it up because I had to get back to work.
Love that.
But when I said possibly, like, if they sign Hopkins and they have him play kind of like Fitzy did his final years in Arizona, my idea was like more or less like positionless football on offense. I know they talked about it on defense last year, and you guys could probably answer this because I don't know, because I don't go as deep as you guys go, but maybe like on certain drives you keep the same personnel out there, but you could just line them up in different spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have they ever done that? And can you see them doing something like that if they sign Hopkins? And that's all I got, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Fatty. Yeah, I mean, look, that's for.
I actually think the positionless thing comes into play more if they don't sign Hopkins.
So in the simplest form, though, not to get into a whole thing, but in the simplest form, the EP system is built for that. That's that's sort of the goal, is that you can run the same play over and over again, but you run it with the same personnel on the field, but each time it's a little bit different. And that's
or you can do it the other way. You keep running the same play with different personnel and different skill sets.
But my point is
differently.
You can put in the Patriots used to do this all the time, and that's why I think this is a good example. You can run Haas Juke out of 21 personnel, which is an empty formation call,
right?
And you can do it 17 different ways. And in the Super Bowl against the Rams, they ran it 3 straight plays to get down the field on the game-winning drive, and they hit 3 different ways, right? They hit it on the juke route to Edelman. They hit it on the hitch, I think it was to Rex Burkhead on the outside, and then they hit the seam to Gronk for the big play. Right. So that was the nature of the beast, and that I think that was actually 22, if I remember correctly. I think Edelman might have been the only wide receiver on the field, and they finally did something that caught Wade Phillips by surprise, and like he was like, what the heck is going on here? So that's the nature of their offense in respect in its simplest form. Obviously, there's like a million different details and things like that go into it that even go beyond my knowledge of it. But the main thing is, I think that the idea of Hopkins, and I'm glad that Patty brought this up, because Mike Lombardi actually brought this up a couple weeks ago. And Mike Lombardi, when he's talking about guys the Patriots might be interested in or sniffing around or is interested in his Hopkins, it doesn't feel like Mike Lombardi just like gets that out of nowhere. And the one thing that Mike Lombardi said is that at this stage of his career, because Hopkins has lost maybe a step on the third level of the defense, like he's not a guy that's going to separate over the top maybe as consistently as he once did. Him playing more in the slot and being sort of like a possession slot receiver was something that Lombardi floated. So I think that the Larry Fitz comp is possible, but my only sort of thing with that is, well, like, what's Juju doing then? Right?
Does
like
Juju become the Z then?
So, well, even still, like yeah, you can run like 3x1s and 2x2s and things like that to get two slots, so to speak. But like, it's not, you're starting to get a little bit complex there in terms of like generating more inside receiver routes.
So, I mean, I think Hopkins can be a slot receiver from the Z. I think that's possible. Also, what's wrong with complex? They should be more complex.
Yeah,
I kind of want them to be.
I hear you.
They need to be.
It would definitely be different from what they've done. Like, because when they had like Edelman and Amendola, for example, that's a lot different than having two 6'1" receivers in the slot.
It's more like.
But I don't hate the Larry Fitz comp in terms of Larry Fitz. Yeah, later on in his career, Larry Fitz became a chain moving slot receiver because he couldn't run down the field the same way anymore.
Right.
And that's how he became a possession guy. He was catching like 120 balls out of the slot in Arizona. There's a chance that DeAndre Hopkins is similar. And I think there's a chance that that's the possibility. And that would explain, at least in theory, if the Hopkins is still in play, Alex, that would kind of explain in theory why DeVante Parker is still here. Right. Is like, because he's going to be the outside guy, and they're looking at Hopkins as more as like your floater, your move piece, your flanker, your Z, and then Juju's still playing in the slot somehow as well. I guess it's possible, and we do know that Bill O'Brien loves empty, so have at it, right? Like, you create 3x1s, create 2x2s, and have multiple slot receivers. Like, go for it. All right. Nick is in Salem. Nick, what's going on?
What's going on, fellas? Great conversation, because a lot of what I was going to ask about kind of got covered. But in relation to the fit of Hopkins and Parker, I guess just the offense at large. So I know you just kind of touched on the slot percentage. I know Hopkins last year, I looked it up, was like around 17% in the slot. But I mean, I think he has done a little bit in the past. Obviously, Juju, Parker, Gesicki to an extent, Hunter Henry in the past, health issues. I think my question is where are we going with the larger picture? And if we're just going to kind of be like middling offense, how are we going to get a good evaluation on Max and kind of decide where we're going in the future, right? Like, what is this all amounting to? And I think, to me, like, going out and getting Hopkins is worth whatever kind of shifting around of offensive pieces may come with that, whether it's, we signed Juju, hey, whatever, kick him to the side because Hopkins is not kicking the side, but, find a role for Hopkins to do that much better and will help us get an evaluation of Mac and kind of like direct where we're going as a franchise. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Is that it, or you got anything else?
No, I think it's it. He hung up.
Yeah. General thoughts, also like a pairing of Parker and Hopkins, kind of the Mike Williams, Keenan Allen sort of build to me, which I know the Chargers have kind of gotten points knocked off them for not having like the speed type of guy as well, which I know we have type one, but it has worked around the league. And I know I was thinking the same thing like Mac in college. College was working with Smith and Waddle and more of the separator type of guys. So I don't know. To me, it's just worth like taking the shot on Hopkins just to see what you have to the most ability before we get into the point where, we're looking at Mac's fifth-year option. And we're kind of in like a Daniel Jones situation where, hey, he had a great year, decent year last year. Daniel Jones talking about we have to decide if you want to pay him or not. We're coming up on that point quickly, and I just kind of want to take a step back and look at the larger perspective.
Yeah,
That's
Nick,
it.
no problem. Yeah, thanks for the call. Look, we're all about the larger perspective here, and I think we're both in agreement that signing Hopkins is a no-brainer, and figuring out what you have with Mac is also a no-brainer. But in terms of the bigger picture, I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. As much as all this sounds all well and good, and I do agree that getting into the minutia of how these pieces fit together with Hopkins in the mix is almost back to having first world problems again, Alex. Like, we're almost back to
almost.
you know, like this is what good teams have to worry about. But at the same time, that it doesn't have a long shelf life. Like, this is not a long-term
So no,
answer.
this is a quick fix. This is a quick fix. It's still going to be, Evan, we are going to be sitting here next year in March doing the draft,
talking about
wide receivers and tackles.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same thing we just did. Wide receivers, tackles, wide receivers, tackles, and it's going to be the third, basically since they drafted Mac. 2021 was receivers, tackles, and corners. Right. Last year was receivers, tackles, and corners. All right, they checked the cornerback box. They should be good. Maybe not. All right.
I'm not saying that they're not going to be good because of Christian Gonzalez.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
It still won't be on that level, though.
Yeah.
It'll be wide receivers.
It'll be like a mid-round corner.
Right.
Like
It'll
that.
be wide receivers and tackles. That is going to be the draft next year.
Yep.
Whether that's Joe Alt, whether that's Aggie Hall.
Okay, are these real people? I don't even know what you're talking
Joe
about.
Alt's the number one tackle in the class. Aggie Hall's at Texas. He's an Alabama transfer.
Sounds like a Madden creative player to me.
Blanked on the name of the other Texas receiver who's actually filthy, who I want them to get, who everybody's sleeping on. Xavier Worthy.
Who is there? Who's going to be my Zay Flowers? Like, who's going to be my burner that separates and makes me look, makes me get all hot and bothered?
Honestly, so Adonai Mitchell's a guy I really like in that role. He's super fast. Roman Wilson from Michigan. You're going to like Xavier Worthy. Okay. Xavier Worthy, he broke out as a freshman, and then he was kind of hurt last year.
Yep.
He's going to be with Quinn Ewers. He's going to have a great chance in the Big 12.
Not Arch Manning?
No, he's redshirting this year.
Oh.
Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback than Arch Manning, for the record. But, and actually, as I'm looking at this right now, the database we use, they have in their way too early mock draft at 14th overall to the Patriots, Xavier Worthy.
All right.
Xavier Worthy's the guy the Patriots
I'll believe
need.
it when I see it.
All right.
I don't think that's
Well,
gonna
you
happen.
even said, we were texting about this a couple weeks ago, you're going to kind of jumpstart the draft a little bit here the next couple weeks?
I'm going to try. Now all these extensions and all this.
If I send you a couple Xavier Worthy things, will you watch just Xavier Worthy? All right.
Fine.
I'm sending this to you right now.
Mark in Connecticut. What's up, Mark?
Hey, guys. How's it going? I just had two quick things on that. I've been saying for years Rodney Harrison has been getting snubbed, absolutely, from the Hall of Fame. I don't know what the problem is there, but he was probably one of the best safeties to ever play the game, in my opinion. And then
no
also,
arguments here.
And the other thing is the problem is that we don't have a Rob Gronkowski or a Julian Edelman like Tom Brady had. When the game was on the line, he knew who he was going to, and the defense couldn't stop whoever he was going to go to. We don't have that receiver-like type guy, but I feel like if we get DeAndre Hopkins, maybe he can be that type of receiver for Mac Jones.
Yeah, we agree on that. Thanks for the call, Mark. We talk about Tuesday players. You could talk about it in that vein, right? Of when and I sort of wrote this after minicamp and after the offseason program. Like, yeah, they look competent. Like they looked like an NFL offense again. They got some pieces. Mike Gesicki looked good. Parker had a good, strong finish. I think his last practice was probably his best one. We didn't see Juju and Tyquan a whole lot, but you could see, all right, they got some things going on. They got some pieces. But is it enough when it's 3rd and 6 for the game and they need to beat Buffalo and it's 35-31 and they need one more score? Like, are they going to be able to put the drive together?
Right.
And that you won't know if they can do that when the cards are down until the cards are down. And that's sort of part of this whole thing. But I think DeAndre Hopkins could be that guy as well. And I think in particular, I think he could be a guy like on 3rd down that could certainly be that guy, right? It's someone that you can really rely upon and go to and that sort of thing. So we're all on the board with Rodney Harrison, which did you write about that recently or something?
We mentioned it very briefly on the last show.
Okay. Yeah.
I mentioned it somewhere recently.
I'm always for our soapboxing about Rodney Harrison.
Yes.
I like that. I'm good with that. All right, last call here. Then we're gonna call it a day. Leo in Boston. What's up, Leo? Leo.
Hi.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hey.
So I've been, there's a lot of talk about wide receivers and, all this stuff. But in the years past, I feel like a huge issue I've seen that we haven't figured out yet is having a solid, consistent offensive line. There has been talk about the tackles. Is Riley Reiff going to show up? Is Trent Brown going to, quote unquote, get on board, right? But even if he gets on board, he's going to get hurt like he always does. There's going to be some problem. And our depth is like a ton of question marks, really young guys, stuff like that. Is our coaching staff up to the task of coaching these guys up when we need the offensive depth? Are these kind of unproven rookies going to show up? I feel like if we can't protect Mac Jones, we haven't in the years past, I don't really care. I feel way more confident in our wide receiver class than I do in our current offensive line state. David Andrews is the only guy who's been there for a while who's been dependable, but he's getting old. His backup is Cody Rucci and Jake Andrews. I don't know. I'm way more scared about that, and I feel like there's not a ton of talk about it. So I'm curious to see, where's the issue? Is this where we're going to go with, or can the Pats solidify this? Am I wrong? Are we fine on O-line? What do you guys think?
Yeah, thanks for the call, Leo. We're up against a little bit, so I'm just going to let you go. But look, we've been talking about offensive line for months. So the receivers and talking about wide receivers and DeAndre Hopkins, it's sexier, it's more fun. There's no doubt about it that people want to hear us talk about that stuff more than they want us to hear about who's the guard behind Mike Onwenu, right? It's just a more appealing topic. With that being said, I've said all show long and basically all offseason long since the draft, they, in my opinion, have not done enough at tackle. They did not shore up the tackle spot. That should be something that we should hold them accountable for. If we get into the season and they're struggling to block on the edges, then we can point directly to the offseason and say, you did this to yourself. You saw this train coming and you didn't move off the tracks, right? And that's, I think, a general legitimate criticism. Now, I'm not afraid of the interior three at all. I think Cole Strange should be a decent player for them. David Andrews, you mentioned, and Onwenu in the inside will be good as well. It's the tackle spot, and yeah, it does come down to it a lot of an extent to Adrian Clem and Bill O'Brien scheming it up. They're going to have to coach it up. They're going to have to coach around it. They're going to have to coach. They're going to have to call things and call plays that protect it and make sure that those guys are playing to their strengths and not putting them in disadvantageous positions. And that's coaching. And do I think that they have better coaching to pull that off? Yeah, I do. And I think Adrian Clem is going to be a fine offensive line coach, maybe more in terms of just relevance, Carmen Brasillo, right? No one's going to compare him to Scar. But Carmen Brasillo is a really good offensive line coach, a professional offensive line coach. And I think Adrian Clem will be similar, and Bill O'Brien will figure it out. And will it be good enough? Well, we can't. Only time will tell on that. But I'm not really afraid of depth along the offensive line because I think they have bodies. It's about starting caliber players. And I think that that's sort of where I'm coming at as well with receivers. It's not about they have bodies. They have 4 or 5 guys that can play on an NFL field. I think 4 right now, conservatively. I not assuming DeAndre Hopkins is here. And on offensive line, I did my roster projection. I knew that's what we were supposed to talk about today until all this news took over.
Right.
I did my roster projection. I had 10 guys, 10 linemen on my roster. And my guess is they'll get it down to 8 or 9. There'll be an injury, Foxborough flu, right? Something along those lines. But in reality, they have 10 rosterable offensive linemen.
Yes.
Do they have 2 good tackles? Or do they just have bodies at tackle? That's going to be the question.
It's what I've said about it. They're just throwing as much as they can against the wall and seeing what sticks. And if that's going to be the plan, they should sign a guy like DJ Fluker. Not because he's going to fix everything, he's going to be better. But if that's the plan, the more guys you have, the more chance one of them's the right one. So, if you're going to buy lottery tickets, you might as well buy – well, no, that's a bad example. But if you have $10 to buy lottery tickets, why are you only spending $9 on lottery tickets and saving the $1? You might as well take as many shots as you can.
There you go. All right, so we're going to wrap it here. But what a busy day Marine for June 29th. We got 2 contract extensions, DeVante Parker and Juwan Bentley signing contract extensions, multiple years in the books for the Patriots. DeAndre Hopkins still out there. We're still holding our breath on that one. And what does it all mean? I'm not entirely sure that it's all connected, but it certainly doesn't hurt their chances creating more cap space. Yes, you want to get those guys locked in. Yes, you want to start to build that core that we were talking about with Juwan Bentley, Alex. But last thing here, it does sort of feel like they're moving money around for something, right? Like, why now? Like, you could have done this when you got
to get Lawrence Guy out of that holdout.
You could have done this when you got into camp. We could have done this in August. Like, they tend to do this like at the end of August, right?
Right.
You know, you had a good training camp. We're going to reward you with the extension. Doing this on a week before July 4th tells me that they're accounting for something. They're moving around money for something. So we'll continue to monitor that situation. We'll be back next Thursday for another show, and we'll continue to break this all down and think about all these different situations. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, for Marine Behind the Glass, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for listening to 4 straight hours of me at the host chair, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.